Welcome to World Business, the programme where global finance meets local transformation. Today we focus on the rising relevance of ESG, environmental, social and governance standards in driving sustainable growth across emerging markets. In a world increasingly shaped by climate targets, social accountability and regulatory scrutiny, businesses can no longer afford to treat ESG as a buzzword. For economies like Azerbaijan's, rich in natural resources but keen to diversify and modernise, the ESG agenda is more than compliance, it's a competitive edge. Well, earlier I spoke with Ms. Gunay Asgarov. She is the Senior Assurance Manager and Head of the ESG practice at PwC Azerbaijan. With her front row perspective on the region's corporate shift, we explored how Azerbaijani firms are navigating ESG disclosures, whether investors are demanding cleaner operations, and what role global advisory giants like PwC are actually playing in shaping this shift. From oil majors to startups, ESG reporting is reshaping reputations, risk profiles, and investor flows. So how real is the change? And is Baku just ticking boxes or leading the way? Let's find out. Gunay, thank you very much for joining us on World Business. Let's start with the basics. How is ESG defined and applied in the context of the Azerbaijani business environment?
Indeed, let's look at the definition of what ESG is. So it basically means sustainable development from the perspective of environmental, social and governance. And I would say there is a concept of double materiality, which is looking at the sustainability matters from impact perspective and from financial perspective. Because how else does a company know what to report? Which sustainability matters are important for one company or industry or for another one? So here comes, as I mentioned, the concept of double materiality. Impact materiality, what it means, it basically measures the impact of a company on people and environment, and it extends to the company's operations, to its upstream and downstream value chain, as well as through its products, services, and even through its key business partnerships. And sustainability matters from a financial perspective. When are these material for the company? It's when the environment is creating risks and opportunities that are actually affecting the company's financial performance, position, its cash flows, its access to finance and cost of capital. And the impacts can be different. It can be actual, it can be potential, negative or positive. And it's measured in the short, medium and long term. So a combination of these impact and financial materiality perspective sustainability matters is actually what forms what a company should report. The most material impact. That's what each company and each industry should report in the financial statements. In the Azerbaijan context, I would say that the country is primarily focusing on impact materiality, sustainability matters, and the popular framework here is Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. If you have heard of the framework. Yes, so, but unfortunately financial materiality perspective is not yet that popular. And I hope with the introduction of international sustainability standards, board standards, IFRS S1 and S2, I hope that the country and companies would transition towards that as well, because measuring the financial implication of any event on the company's performance is very important, and integrating it into its financial reporting as well.
And very interesting concept, that double materiality. And of course, as you mentioned, there are ESG frameworks, regulatory blueprints, if you like, the world over. But it's not just a case of applying those here in Azerbaijan, is it? There's also proactive work, development, thought, ideas going on here to really enhance that ESG capability.
Indeed. And just to mention that from regulatory perspective, in Azerbaijan, there is no unified national adopted sustainability framework yet. Ministry of Finance, even if it hasn't explicitly adopted the framework, but it has acknowledged it, and so currently there are works ongoing to building capacity, so capacity building, and focusing on transitioning to these new standards. For example, I would mention our neighbor Turkey. They have actually adopted ISSB framework, and they are actively implementing it. And from PwC Eurasia perspective, I would also say that we have also started works on helping companies with preparation of sustainability reports in line with IFRS S1 and S2, and based on double materiality concept, by the way. It's very interesting. Whenever you're combining financial and sustainability matters into a single integrated report, you can really see a complete picture of the company. By just looking purely at the financial results in the report, you can't really say what is causing, let's say, drop in the costs, or let's say some fluctuations in the revenue. But when you're actually looking at the sustainability side, you're seeing the basic performance metrics, what's happening on the employee side, what's happening with the vendors, how the company is performing across all those KPIs. And when you're combining the two, it really fits into a very good complete picture about the sustainability and solvency of the company.
And how do we make sure that compliance doesn't become a culture killer? You know, the idea of compliance and a vibrant, supportive culture where people are free to be innovative. I think to some people the two seem to be opposite to each other. How do we make sure that actually the two become one, that we can create a culture where ESG doesn't become a burden and an afterthought, but it becomes part of actually the way people do business?
Maybe actually Azerbaijan may be a good example of that. At the moment, regulator is not really pushing. Even so, the Central Bank of Azerbaijan, even though they have issued some, for example, certain instructions on incorporation of only environmental aspects into risk management practices of banks, also green taxonomy document has been published right around COP and updated further in February of 2025. And as I mentioned, Minister of Finance hasn't yet adopted the ISSB standards. So whoever is reporting in the country now, it's done on voluntary basis, purely based out of the value they see in this report for their stakeholders. Some of them are reporting just because they're engaged in international transactions. They are having significant exports, or they have lending from foreign institutions where there is reporting on the KPIs. So Azerbaijan is an example actually of companies where they report based on their internal needs or like business needs. I would maybe compare it to EU, UK, where, for example, they are mandatory, let's say, disclosures, mandatory frameworks, so much for companies to report. And even with this introduction of CSRD, I know there was Omnibus project that has postponed even reporting for some of the companies.
And we've seen the effect of burdensome compliance on competition in Europe, haven't we?
Yes, indeed. So we've seen that practically happening. Let's say they've been identifying companies that would have to report as a first wave, second wave, and it all comes with cost and people. It's really, it's really a complicated thing. You would have to set up a process around it for proper data governance. And it all comes at cost. And I do understand why it's becoming so burdensome. Maybe for large global corporates, it would have been more smoother, but for, I don't know, SMEs definitely it's a tough thing to deal with. So.
Now, in your job, you work with a lot of different clients in a lot of different sectors. You evaluate a lot of data. I know that sectors are different. You know, I work in the media. I wouldn't expect to understand automotive or technology as well as people that work in those industries. Nevertheless, is it possible to evaluate how far each sector has come in terms of ESG relative to each other?
Indeed. Speaking about sectors, let's say for Azerbaijan, I would say energy and finance sector have been the most proactive ones, and actually energy is the one being affected the most. For example, in
that's very interesting, because the sectors that many would suggest have, in a sense, got the biggest challenge to overcome are the ones who are making the most progress. So there's something about taking on that challenge which is really creating a fast pace of change.
Indeed. So it's just based on my observations, let's say in the country, with, for example, introduction of this green taxonomy and this instructions for incorporation of ESG factors into risk management. So what the regulator is trying to do to set this framework and use financial institutions and whoever the enterprises regulated by the central bank to cascade it down to corporates. Of course, starting from the large corporates first, and then cascading down further to SMEs. And so, as I mentioned, that's why its financial sector is stepping forward in that, because it should be in the upfront, in the leading line. To be in the leading line, because they are basically the implementers of the governmental, let's say, instructions and policies. And next, because we are, as a country, oil and gas, let's say, dependent economy, of course it is gradually changing, and government is trying to diversify into other sectors such as agriculture, logistics, and tourism. So energy sector is taking that burden first also, and there are national determined contributions of Azerbaijan, where there are lots of commitments towards reduction of GHG emissions. So that sector is, SOCAR, for example, they are doing a lot of initiatives on that. Other sectors, as I mentioned, agriculture and construction, they are also catching up. And we really hope that agriculture really goes further with, for example, there are a number of economic sectors that I've listed in the Green Taxonomy document in Azerbaijan. For example, using of renewable energy, energy efficiency, pollution, agriculture, sustainable agriculture, aquaculture, protection of marine. So these directions government is trying to put the most financing in, and also enhance the country's reputation in international arena in terms of attracting sustainable financing from institutions such as World Bank, EBRD. We have some of the IFIs quite active in the market. So the country's reputation also matters a lot. But yeah, like I mentioned, finance sector, energy, and agriculture and construction are catching up.
Okay, that's very interesting. And of course, winning over CEOs, winning over government officials, ministers, that's part of the job. But also the public too need to have trust, need to understand what this is all about and where it's going. Where do you assess levels of public trust in this shift towards ESG, and how far the public really understands? Are we communicating clearly enough to the public as a business community at the moment?
To be honest, Azerbaijan is in a transition stage, and there's still a lot to be done, and for people to digest indeed what an ESG is, because it really has to deal with this mentality and understanding. But the past 2 years, it's been like a different journey, and especially after COP, before and after COP, there have been so many awareness sessions, workshops, organized at universities, at various, let's say, associations, not only on a company level or business level, but in other fields.
So you've really felt the difference that COP29 has created?
I do feel the difference. I do feel at least people have started having some, even younger generation, they have started having some understanding, even like concepts such as circular economy. What is circular economy? I mean, we haven't dealt with that terminology, let's say, before, but now it's becoming more and more, let's say, popular, and I'm sure our universities also are somehow integrating this sustainability, let's say, matters, sustainable development into their curriculum. So, but overall, in Azerbaijan at the moment there is lack of, like I mentioned, a unified framework for sustainability reporting, and on the company side there is this lack of clarity from the government. So whatever is being reported, it's being done on a voluntary basis. And there's could be some reporting inconsistency, and therefore maybe less public confidence, which I believe is going to be built over time once. And just to mention, IFRS accounting standards is a national statutory reporting framework in the country. The same board has issued sustainability standards effective 1st January 2024. And I believe, just like the example of Turkey, I believe that our government will be more towards adopting these sustainability standards going forward. And once it's adopted, there'll be even more clarity. And disclosures will be consistent, there'll be more transparency, and it will be more integrated into financial reporting.
Now, Gunay, you're head of the ESG practice for one of the world's most famous professional services brands here in Azerbaijan. I mean, that's a big responsibility. You work with many different clients. What practical work how do you actually work with clients? I think a lot of people would look at this. If you were being cynical, you might say, is it just providing PowerPoint slides and changing the name to a different client? I'm assuming it's a lot more than that. Give us a sense of what that work involves.
To be honest, ESG field is so broad. There are so many service streams inside. So ranging from basically consulting support to the clients to assurance, because assurance is also important. And these services are different from FS to non-FS. We even have different leaflets for each of the sectors. So the most popular and tailored to the country services, I would say ESG health check. So basically going through the maturity level of the company to see where it's standing with regards to each of these each of the 3 ESG pillars. Another thing is, for example, supporting companies in implementing the new sustainability standards. So basically performing gap assessment, designing a roadmap for them, and basically going step by step with them in setting this, let's say, for example, climate-related framework to produce required disclosures for the sustainable statements. And another service is actual support with compilation of the sustainable statements. Also, performing double materiality analysis, the one that I mentioned previously, it's actually the basic document that you will have to start with, because without knowing your material topics, you cannot build your report.
I'm going to be using the word double materiality all day from now on.
DMA, even the shorter terminology for that is DMA. It's basically your starting point. Otherwise, you do not know what your structure is going to be, because everything is built around those material topics. So DMA analysis. Another thing is, let's say, data governance controls around the process, because credibility and standardization of ESG data is also important. We are, at all times, we are trying to avoid greenwashing. And I've seen that actually happening in some of the companies' reports, presenting only the good side. And that's what I call, or insignificant information, putting insignificant information into sustainability reports. So looking at it more of like a marketing document. Of course, it's used for that purpose as well, but just like financial reports, we should be ensuring that only material topics, relevant topics, are reported in objective, complete and accurate manner to avoid misleading users of the reports, because eventually it's investors, key decision makers that are looking at the statements and making some certain decisions, and there's a lot of room at the moment to mislead them.
There's a logic, I suppose, to, if you really want that accurate objective assessment, that marking one's own homework is not the best approach, that bringing people in who will be able to tell you the bad and the good is probably the best method.
Yes, and here comes also assurance. At the moment, it's more of a limited assurance, because to achieve reasonable assurance, where you would assure most of the disclosures in the sustainability report, is a bit burdensome, both for the company that is preparing and for the auditor that is assuring. So assuring at least the key, let's say, indices, key KPIs. That's what's being practiced in the country, and we are also involved in that. I have a good example for in Azerbaijan. There are certain companies where sustainability KPIs are embedded into strategy and into annual KPIs of the C-level. And let's say they wouldn't get their bonuses if their annual, let's say, results, including sustainability results, are not assured.
That's a very interesting area, this, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it's one thing to say, run the company as best you can, focus on shareholder returns, sell as much product as possible. Oh, and by the way, it would be nice if you could behave in a sustainable way. That's very different to saying you will not get your bonus and might get fired if you do not achieve these ESG KPIs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So among, like you mentioned, financial KPIs, let's say EBITDAs or cost to income ratios or certain financial KPIs, there are sustainability ones, such as, for example, lost time injured ratios or fatalities. So, I mean, those ratios are also specific to the industry. They are now, I see that they are now forming part of the official KPI list that the management is being assessed on an annual basis. And shareholders, some of them go even one step further by having external assurance of those KPIs. And only after that, after having an external opinion on the performance, they would appoint and release bonuses to the management. It's a good practice, actually. It's keeping everyone responsible and in a way highlighting importance of ESG matters as well.
Yes. Now, of course, Azerbaijan doesn't just exist in a vacuum. We're interlinked with many neighbouring countries with strong partnerships, plenty of trade. Give us a sense of how ESG is playing out across the region in the neighbouring countries too.
Mm-hmm. In the neighboring countries, as I mentioned, for example, Turkey has been active. It has already adopted this ISSP standards, and our PwC colleagues in Turkey, I mean, they've been sharing a lot of experiences with us on both on the sustainability reports and on the climate side. We are also, as PwC Eurasia, we're closely working with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Mongolia, as well as Georgia. So there we also see same tendencies, just like in Azerbaijan, maybe even one or two steps forward. For example, Kazakhstan, they have also, each of these countries have already developed some level of green taxonomy customized to their country, and have also been voluntarily reporting on, let's say, GRI or any other frameworks, but also, just like Azerbaijan, haven't clearly adopted a single framework for reporting. As for Azerbaijan, as I mentioned, there are certain companies that are exposed internationally. So they have significant share of exports, or same financial institutions. They have lendings from foreign institutions, and there are certain covenants that should be complied with. And nowadays, I from my personal practice, I see ESG, or let's say environmental sustainability related covenants also being incorporated into the contracts with the key parties, even listing industries that are classified as, let's say, high impact from environmental perspective, and which ones should be even avoided.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's this is ongoing. Azerbaijan is basically moving in the same direction as these neighboring countries, but just some are more, let's say, ahead in terms of regulation, because regulator is really playing a crucial part in it, because it is stimulating this progress.
Gunay, as you say, moving in the right direction, clearly a lot of progress already been made. What's next? What does Azerbaijan need to get right when it comes to ESG over the next 12, 24 months?
So this shift in mentality that we've spoken about just before, because at the end of the day, companies are run by humans, and we need good, educated talents, starting from the board level to regular employees. So we need this shift, and it's progressing. It's ongoing. Second thing is the way companies are actually approaching ESG. It should be done from top to bottom. So from top, I mean by incorporating this into strategy. So strategy is the first thing that they have to start with, and then setting up the appropriate governance structure around it. Each topic should have an assignee. So let's say from the board level, there should be some individual responsible for the overall oversight and implementation of whatever ESG initiatives that are set at the top. And a certain ESG working group or a department, or it can be different from company to company depending on their setup, to implement this plan actually. So someone should be held accountable basically for this implementation, and then further cascading down to obtaining required platforms and tools for reporting against metrics and targets that are set in the plan, and so on. So this setup, I think that's what companies should be working on, and actually we are seeing this from requests for proposals that we're receiving. There's a lot of strategy, roadmap development, assessment of KPIs. So a lot of requests like that are coming, and there are more now than it used to be before. So it's the right approach, because purely compliance would be just to feel, let's say, to make the tick mark,
yes,
to have my report, to have it assured and submitted to a regulator, without the complete, let's say, picture starting from the top, because at the end of the day, it's not only of compliance nature, but it's also this value creation for your stakeholders.
Well, it sounds like we've gone already far beyond box ticking, although there is still quite a long way to go. Gunay, thank you so much for taking the time to explain all that in detail. I've expanded my vocabulary, but more importantly than that, we've really delved deep into some of these ESG issues, and for your analysis, we thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here and to help and to expand your terminology in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, let's take a look at the week in numbers.
Wall Street's main indexes ended lower on Thursday, with the Dow shedding 0.25%, the S&P 500 sliding more than 0.5%, and the Nasdaq tumbling over 0.8%. Shares of Tesla suffered their worst one-day loss since March as the clash between CEO Elon Musk and U.S. President Donald Trump continued to escalate. Musk stepped up criticism of the president's massive tax cut bill, while Trump alleged Musk was upset because the legislation takes away tax benefits for electric vehicle purchases. Daniel Ives is managing director of Wedbush Securities.
Look, we're bullish on Tesla. We see a $2 trillion market cap in the horizon, but this is definitely a Twilight Zone situation between Musk and Trump, and it's weighing on Tesla stock. Everyone knew tax credit was going to get taken out. That's not necessarily the surprise. It's this battle between friends. That basically, look, these are almost like a junior high school battle.
Among the day's other stock moves, shares of Lululemon, down slightly at the close, plunged more than 20% in extended trading after the athletic wear company cut its annual profit outlook and forecast second quarter revenue below estimates. Shares of Brown-Forman fell 18% after the Jack Daniel's maker forecast a decline in annual revenue and profit. And shares of crypto firm Circle Internet more than doubled in their stock market debut on Thursday, firing up the IPO market and likely encouraging other crypto companies to follow suit.
Well, that is all from World Business this week, where global trends meet local insights. ESG then isn't just about climate, it's about credibility, capital and continuity. As Azerbaijan positions itself for a post-oil era, the question isn't if, but how fast its businesses will adapt. Until next time, from all of us here at AnewZ, stay well.